Hey guys, if you've made it through the first 2 CFA levels, well done, it's an amazing achievement. But contrary to what you might have heard, level 2 is not the hardest exam, level 3 is. So if you're going to pass it and become a charter holder, you'll need to refine your strategy and your exam technique, which is what I'll help you with in this video. If you don't know me, I'm Harris, an investment banker and CFA charter holder who studied at Imperial College London. I completed the charter in 2023, having passed all 3 exams first time with 90th percentile scores at level 1 and 2. Now this is going to be a detailed video, but I'm going to share tons of value that will help you with your exam, so stay with me, let's go. Let's start with a level overview. Now level 1 is introductory in nature and the exam questions are typically more recall based. Level 2 goes deeper and is more applied, but level 3 takes it up a notch and now you need to start thinking like an investor, and the questions are typically a lot more analyzed and evaluation based, and I'll show you an example of the types of questions you'll get at level 3 versus level 1 and 2 shortly. But broadly, this is where it all comes together. There is no more cramming and simply doing practice questions and sitting the exam. If you don't understand things fundamentally at this stage, you will get found out. We'll also talk more about the required level of understanding shortly. Now more broadly, level 3 is a lot more qualitative than level 2, so there are fewer formulas and you can actually get through the lectures faster than you can at level 2, but don't be deceived because it's all in the application at level 3 and that takes time. Now in terms of topics which I put up on screen, you can see that they look a little different to what you would have seen at level 1 and 2. So there's only 7 modules now versus 10 at level 1 and 2, and there's no more quant, FRA or corporate finance, so you might be pleased to know that, but generally speaking there's a lot more focus on portfolio management. Econ is embedded within asset allocation in the form of capital market expectations, so that one can be a little bit difficult, and otherwise you'll still study fixed income, alternative investments and equity, which is embedded within portfolio construction. Derivatives is there as a standalone and you'll do a lot more application of derivative and risk management strategies here, which is actually quite fun. Then you've got ethics, which just builds on level 1 and 2, and finally you've got the pathways. Now these were introduced in 2024 and allow you to choose between portfolio management, which has more of a public securities focus, or private markets or private wealth, depending on your intended career path. So this is definitely a positive development. To re-emphasize, portfolio management makes up a huge part of the exam at level 3, which tells you everything you need to know about the focus here. In terms of the exam, this is the first level where you'll have an essay component. So this is known as structured or constructed response, and essentially this is a free-form answer where you actually have to write the answer rather than it being multiple choice, and this makes up half the exam. Now we'll talk more about that later in the video, but the other half of the exam is still multiple choice with vignettes as you saw at level 2. Now importantly, in the past, the essay component or structured or constructed response was in the AM session and multiple choice was in the PM session, so they were split. However, these are now mixed, which is a positive development. And the reason for this is that structured response take longer to do, so the AM session tended to be super time pressured, whereas now, because they're mixed, you can reallocate some of the time you save from multiple choice questions to structured response. Overall, you'll get 11 item sets for both structured response and multiple choice, so 22 in total, and each of those item sets is worth 12 points, and those 12 points are split across roughly 4 questions, so in total there's around 88 questions. Now importantly, for structured response, each question is not worth an equivalent number of points, so you don't get 3 points for each question. Some can be less, some can be more. Real quick, if you're going to pass the CFA exams, you need to master the calculator, but many people don't know where to start, so I've created a free guide with everything you need. The link is in the description. Okay, let's discuss the level 3 mindset. One of the biggest challenges that many people face when they do the level 3 exam is that they're still approaching their studies with the level 1 and 2 mindset. Level 3 requires a higher level of learning, and to bring this to life, let's look at Bloom's taxonomy. Now you can see the hierarchy here with remember at the bottom all the way up to create at the top. Now at level 1, the questions will largely require you to remember and understand with some application. At level 2, you transition upwards, so it's mainly understand and apply with some analysis, but at level 3, there's only some apply and it's mainly analyze and evaluate. The message here is you cannot memorize your way through level 3. You have to understand things intuitively and fundamentally, especially because level 3 does not actually reteach a lot of the content. This can be an issue for some people because the minimum pass score at level 1 and 2 is around 65 to 70%, which means you can pass the exams without knowing everything thoroughly. This is what Mark MELDRUM calls Swiss cheese knowledge, which is essentially having holes in your knowledge similar to Swiss cheese. Now to bring this taxonomy to life with the types of questions you'll get, let's look at an example from Mark MELDRUM where he walks through duration at different levels of learning. So at the bottom of the hierarchy we had remember, and the type of question you might see here is what is duration, so it's simple recall. Then as we step up for understand, you might be asked how do you calculate duration, so now you need to know what the formula is. And then taking it up another notch, apply. Here you would be asked, what is the expected return of this bond given a change in yields of X% over the next 6 months? So as you can see, there's a lot more component to understanding there, and then you have to apply it to the question. Taking it up another step to analyze, here you might be asked something like, given this benchmark, which fixed income portfolio is indexing? Now for this type of question, you need to know how to analyze a benchmark, and then you need to know what indexing is, and you need to know what sort of metrics you would see if someone was indexing, and then you have to be able to compare the two to arrive at the answer. So there's a lot of layers to arriving at the answer. And finally, you have evaluate, and here you might be asked something like, given this expected future economic state, which portfolio would be expected to outperform this benchmark? So there's a lot of components to that question. And this last one is a really good example of a level 3 question, and is what the majority of the questions will be like. Overall, it requires you to evaluate the economic conditions, what this means for yields, and then analyze the portfolio depending on its duration statistics. So there's several layers of understanding required to answer this. Now we'll talk more about how to unlock higher levels of learning later in this video, but for now, let's discuss prep providers. Now there's a lot of prep providers out there, and I don't think it matters too much which one you go for at level 1. Level 2 matters more, but at level 3 it really does matter because of the depth of understanding required. My honest view is, having seen the level 3 content for other prep providers as well, I'd definitely use Mark MELDRUM at level 3, no questions about it. If there's one criticism of Mark MELDRUM at level 1 and 2, it's that he's too detailed, and that might be fair enough, but at level 3 you need this detail, and he has an excellent way of explaining things that simply make sense. What's more, in the last 2 months he does live drop-in sessions for the most challenging topics, so that's fixed income, derivatives, and econ, and he also does live run-throughs of his mocks where you can ask questions and really reinforce and substantiate your understanding. Honestly, this is a game changer. It allows you to ask very specific questions and fill in those knowledge gaps, or to learn from other people's questions. And I have friends who retook their level 3 exams and went with Mark MELDRUM the second time, and they agreed that this was a game changer. And finally, a big factor is his structured response Q bank. Now, the structured response component of the exam is something new, and most students struggle with this. It's actually a big reason many people fail. And the CFA Learning Ecosystem Q bank does not have many structured response questions. Mark MELDRUM writes his own, and they're super thorough, and there's many of them, and honestly this is a key component of your preparation. However, as ever, his notes are not the best, so this is where I would recommend you buy IFT's notes, and probably their high yield package as well, so you can access the condensed version of those lecture notes, and this helps with the reviews. And together with the Mark MELDRUM package, this is honestly a game changer. I've recommended this to many people, and many people have had success with this. Plus, I've secured you an exclusive 10% off of the IFT component. The coupon and links are in the description. Okay, let's now discuss study strategy. Now, I want to call something out straight away. You are now a level 3 candidate, so clearly you know how to study, so I don't need to spell everything out again. The usual stuff applies. Give yourself 6 months, study 1 to 2 hours per day, 4 to 5 times a week, and step it up as the exam nears. But here's some things that are more specific to level 3. Firstly, in terms of the approach to lectures, I'd recommend you watch the video with full focus until a natural break point, and only then cross-reference the notes, add context, and as ever, don't make notes from scratch. The focus here really needs to be on understanding. As I said, the only way you can pass level 3 is if you understand things intuitively and can apply and evaluate and so on. So you need to devote your time and energy when you're studying to focusing on what Mark MELDRUM or whoever the lecturer is saying and understanding it. You don't want to divide your attention between making notes and so on and so forth. Always keep track of your progress, rate your confidence, and make sure you know what you need to revisit, and keep a running list of questions because this is going to guide your reviews. Secondly, first principle thinking is key, and it's more important than ever at level 3. You now need to be able to synthesize knowledge, apply it, and explain things, and for that you need deep understanding, and for that you can't have open gaps and loops in your knowledge. Recall the point around Swiss cheese knowledge. If you're studying something and you feel like there's a missing link, go back to the relevant part of level 1 or 2 and study it again, or go on Google or via ChatGPT or however you do it, but make sure you fill the knowledge gap. You must always be questioning things, and if you don't have an answer for those questions, then you don't understand it, so you need to go and do some digging. Don't try and memorize. Now, I did a video on both first principle thinking and learning techniques, which will help you access these higher levels of learning. The links are in the description. The third thing is that you need to move on to application faster. Practice questions have always been important, including at level 1 and 2, but you need to move on to this more quickly at level 3 because there's a whole type of question that you haven't seen before. Now, this is enabled by a slightly shorter and less quantitative curriculum than at level 2, so it means you can get through it faster, but as I said, that means you need to move on to application more quickly, ideally at least 8 weeks from the exam, if not earlier. A lot of that time and energy will be spent on the structured response questions, which I'll touch on again shortly. But one thing to call out about both CFAI's, but more importantly MELDRUM's practice questions, are that they are formative, not summative. That means they're designed to develop and reinforce your understanding, not test your understanding, which means they're harder than the real exam. So don't be demoralized if you're getting things wrong, just keep working and keep learning from them. Naturally, this also means that you won't score as highly as level 1 and 2 because the questions at level 3 are more difficult. So if you're scoring at 65% or above, you're actually doing very well. Finally, on mocks at level 1, I recommend them in the last couple of weeks. That's not the case at level 3. It should be 4 to 6 weeks out because there's more of them and you're going to have to develop your technique and there's a lot to it. So give yourself time, but I'll touch on this more again shortly. Now, if you want to see how all of this is applied, including live study with me sessions, tutorials, and access to tools and resources that will supercharge your learning and increase your chances of passing your level 3 exam, I have something perfect for you. Check out the first link in the description. Okay, let's discuss structured response technique because this is the difference between passing and failing. And that's because this is totally new, you haven't seen it before, and it also massively increases exam time pressure. The first thing to call out is although it's called essay style, it is not an essay. You need to be concise and use bullets only. Don't waste time on grammar, using full sentences, and so on. As Mark Meldrum says, it's not about what you say, it's about what you convey. So just make sure you get the message across. How you say it doesn't matter. The examiner is smart, they'll be able to work out what you're trying to say, providing that it's legible and broadly in line with what they're expecting. Secondly, do not write out the formulas. You won't get any marks for stating the formula and it just uses up time, especially using that bloody formula builder. Remember, the exam is now computerized, so you can't just write it out by hand, so you have to use a formula builder if you're going to state the formula, which just wastes time. If you're going to include your working, which is a good idea because you can get marks for that, don't rewrite the whole formula, just plug in the numbers in their respective places within the formula and write that down. You can get marks if you get the final answer wrong. Thirdly, don't give more answers than they've asked for in an attempt to cover all bases. If they've asked for 2 reasons and you give 3, they will only count the first 2, so the third is a waste of your time. Importantly, pay attention to command words. These will guide how you should answer the question, so make sure you understand what explain, identify, justify, calculate, etc. mean, because these are key to answering the question. Now, Mark Meldrum does a video on this within his course ecosystem, so make sure you watch that. And finally, practice is key, especially for structured response, because as I said, you haven't seen this before and it massively ramps up time pressure. So you need to get in the rhythm of answering these, and there's not many of these types of questions in the CFA learning ecosystem, which is why I'd recommend you do Mark Meldrum's. And when you're doing these, look out for trends because there are recurring themes. So for example, portfolio management for individual investors, things like their goals, objectives, investment constraints, and so on. There is a general blueprint for how you answer those questions. So when you've done enough of those questions, make sure you extract those learnings, write them down and learn them because they will probably come up in the exam. And finally, let's discuss mocks. And here I would definitely focus on Mark Meldrum's because as I said, he writes his own structured response questions. They're a lot more complete and a lot more rigorous, and they will test your understanding and develop your understanding far better than the CFAI ones. He then does live run-throughs of these mocks, which are crucial, so make sure you've done the mocks ahead of that to maximize value. Obviously, these are intense and take around 5 to 6 hours, so make sure you give yourself adequate time to do them, and otherwise make sure you do them under time conditions to replicate the exam. You'll find at level 3 it's far more time pressure than level 1 and 2, so you need to be in the rhythm of working within those constraints. Now, the first few mocks are to establish a baseline, so you're probably not going to do too well. Don't worry, don't be demoralized, just make sure you use your results to guide your reviews. And finally, don't aim for 100%. It's practically impossible and not really worth your time. It's just very inefficient. Around 75% is a very good score. So if you're getting this, you're probably going to be fine in the exam. And related to that, while you're doing the exam, if you are struggling with any particular question, move on and get as many done as you possibly can and then come back. And that doesn't change for the real exam either. Okay, there you have it. A full download of everything you need to pass the CFA Level 3 exam. If you like this, then you're going to love these 2 on screen. Otherwise, thanks for your time and see you in the next video.